Chapter 8. The Liam Score Feb-Barony. The Feb-Barony comprised a blue star and 2 gas planets, along with countless rock fragments. Even the Empire's very best terraforming technology couldn't make an inhabitable planet out of them, and they didn't have the resources to lug that technology through flat space just for a collection of rocks. It was even emptier than the Viscountdom of Parian. But the Liam's head, Baron's household, made sure it wrung revenue from this score domain. There was an enterprise one needs only a star to conduct, involving a stable commodity that was always in demand. They manufactured antimatter fuel. It was considered theoretically impossible to turn matter inside out into antimatter. If one wanted antimatter, they had to rely on an antique method from the dawn of engineering, of civilization. A sun's radiation was stored in solar batteries, and the energy was then pumped into a linear particle accelerator to speed up elementary particles. When accelerated elementary particles smashed into each other, the energy their collision emitted condensed, with pair production as its result, matter and antimatter. Like other resourceless planets, many Yoth antimatter fuel factories were in operation in the Barony. Myriad disks orbited close to the star Feb-. Those were the antimatter fuel factories. Their disks, facing the sun, were loaded with solar batteries, and behind them, 16 linear particle accelerators were radially aligned. The batteries drank in the heat and light emitted by the star, which was subsequently channeled by the accelerators and reborn as protons and antiprotons within the centers of the disks. Only the antiprotons among them were collected. The protons were allowed to leak away into space. It was far more economically viable to transport protons from gas planets than to install separate proton capture traps. The antiprotons, so amassed, were harvested into containers connected to the antimatter fuel factories. Once a container became full, it turned into an independent asteroid orbiting the cluster of factories so that in the unlikely case an incident occurred, the factories wouldn't get destroyed. The Liamek Febdoc, estate of the Feb-Baron, revolved even farther from its sun than the Sob-Bekikar antimatter storage asteroids. There was also the Feb-Gate, married as it was to the Baron's mansion. The connecting vessel entered normal space through this gate. "Show me video of the outside, if you could," asked Jinto. "Sure." She made a complex grasping motion with the control glove, and the walls of the steerer's room filled with the stars innumerable. "I never imagined the stars could be such a sight for sore eyes," Jinto said sincerely. The inner wall of the space-time bubble was a gloomy gray. Compared to that, the twinkling stars had a congenial familiarity to them. He now understood, if only a little, why the Ov called themselves the kin of the stars and the cosmos their home. "We still have a long way to go, Jinto," said Leifir ruthlessly. "We're going straight back into flat space after resupplying." "Can we take a break while resupplying?" asked Jinto hopefully. "A break? You're not doing anything to begin with. Thanks for reminding me. But I'll have you know I'm overseeing all the controls while you're sleeping," he quipped. "You woke me up whenever anything happened." "I haven't woken you up. Nothing ever happened." "Yes, thanks to me and my computing crystals." Fine. Jinto dropped it. While it was true that Jinto couldn't do much of anything, the connecting vessel's operations were being taken care of by its autopilot. He had never actually seen Leifir steering it. Compared to that, Jinto brooded inwardly, "I was the real workhorse, what with all that talking." Leifir called up flight control. "This is the patrol ship Goslotha's connecting vessel. Feb-Barony flight control. Please respond." Her screen switched from displaying the map of the star system to video of a lander woman. "This is Feb-Barony flight control. This is the patrol ship Goslotha's connecting vessel. Requesting fuel resupply." "The patrol ship Goslotha's connecting vessel?" The flight control officer appeared puzzled. It must have seemed strange for a giant ship's smaller vessel to be requesting fuel by itself. Even so, the officer nodded. "Roger that. Gosloth connecting vessel. You are welcome within. Please choose your method of resupply." "This is a Menu Sona light vessel, so I'd like to resupply at the pier." "Roger. Please transmit desired amount of fuel." "Roger." After finishing the transmission protocol, she told Jinto, "If we resupply at the pier, we can take a break." We can likely even take a hot bath. Awesome, said Jinto. A nice bath isn't a bad idea, especially considering you're probably the smelliest royal princess in the galaxy at the moment. What's that I see? Leifier squinted her big, beautiful eyes at him. Oh, it's someone who clearly yearns for death. I'd be more than happy to oblige. Come on, I was just kidding. Jinto was shaken by the light in the princess's raven-black eyes. You don't smell that much, I swear. That much? Leifier's eyes narrowed even more. No, I mean, you don't smell at all, he backpedaled immediately. And indeed, that was the closest he'd arrived to the actual truth of the matter. What impudent rube would ever so much as imply that you smelled even a little? You must have noticed by now, Jinto, that sometimes your jokes irritate more than they amuse. Yeah, but then I forget soon after. It's an issue. Leifier brought a sleeve to her nose and took a whiff. Her face contorted. I suppose your remarks have a kernel of truth. To that, Jinto knew to be cautious and keep his mouth shut. On the other hand, I can't say you're particularly pristine either. Guess not, huh? But I bet if you searched the Empire, you could turn up a couple or more heirs to count 'em stinkier than me right now. There are way more of us out there than there are royal princesses. Leifier opened her mouth to retort, but the flight control officer on screen cut in. Pier resupply approved. Gosloth connecting vessel. All clear. Please make your way to the pyramid. The officer paused halfway. She, too, now squinted questioningly. Suddenly, she opened her eyes wide and murmured, Fee Lartner, royal princess. It seemed the identity of the steerer before her had her in shock. Deeply, she bowed her head. Guess they know of Leifier even all the way out here, thought Jinto. I must look like a big goof by comparison. Are we still cleared to enter the pier? Pressed Leifier. Yes, of course, by all means. You may proceed. Yes. Guided by the information entered by the clearly nervous controller, the vessel drew nearer to the Baron's estate. Febdash Flight Control Center, there's something I must apprise you of. During their approach, Leifier summarized the intrusion of what was all too likely an enemy fleet into Empire territory. But the officer was at a loss for words. It took her a brief spell to pull herself back together. I must relay this to Far-Far-Seef, my noble. Of course, please do so. The scenery tinged by the star Febdash's blue flames, the Baron's estate's details came into sharp relief. Many older orbital estates were shaped like rings in order to simulate gravity through constant rotation. That style of architecture, however, couldn't get around how the levels of gravity and rotational speed varied by stratum. Due to that, the more recent orbital estates, which is to say, those of the past 300 years, were, as a rule, equipped with their own gravity control systems. They came with equipment installation and maintenance costs, but they were generally worth it for the higher quality of life. This estate was the type that had a gravity control system. It was shaped like an inclined hexagon. Its long arm propped up a cubical structure, which was the spaceport. Because it stored the antimatter fuel for Ponyu transport ships, the spaceport was usually installed at a comfortable distance from the estate's main structure. In addition to the prow portion of a giant Kasabia Bender hydrogen carrier, a number of small intrasystem spaceships were docked at the pier like a bunch of gnats. The artificial gravity enveloping the estate took action. The spherical steerer's room rotated. The ceiling of the steerer's room, which faced its bow, now turned away from the estate. Jinto saw a red 17 sign beneath his feet. Pier 17 was reserved for connecting vessels like theirs. They docked. The footage of the outside cut out, reverting the walls around them to their typical milky white color. The green glyphs rolling across the screen communicated to the low-pressure door that the connected tube had been attached. Let's go, Jinto. Leifier removed her equipment and stood up. Right. Jinto stood up with her. How long will we be able to stay for? For about 30 minutes. That's it, he frowned. Washing up would be all he could do in that time. Of course, he was grateful nonetheless. We need to get to Svoggoth as quickly as possible. I know. Jinto followed her into the airlock room. But how much earlier can we get there than the enemy fleet? What, you don't know, she said in a disdainful tone. We'll get there around 27 hours before them, by Svoggoth time. In that case, we've got enough time to kick back, But Jinto took note of her furrowed brow. Is what I would say if I didn't agree that we need to warn Sfog off of the danger with all haste. I thank you for not forgetting that, she replied sharply. They stood atop the airlock room. It was blocked off by the ferret coke elevator ramp. Descend, she commanded of it. Dropping down through the translucent connection tube, the two stepped foot into the Baron's estate. It was the first gravity he'd experienced in 2 days, so he felt dizzy as he scanned around. The skies were starry. With Febdash's shining blue sun nowhere in sight, it was clear this wasn't footage of the outside. There was another giveaway, the countless fish swimming among those stars. 10 odd landers were standing in a row in front of the connecting tube's entryway. They were the Gosuk servants of the Liaf Baron. They made a strange impression on him. Then it dawned on him why. They were all women. The women bowed their heads. Fee Lartner, one of their number, walked forward toward them as reverentially as ever. It was the flight control officer from before. She kept her gaze away from the face of the Empress's granddaughter, as though looking directly at it would invite destiny's wrath upon her. If you would be so kind as to enter our humble abode, I would be delighted to guide you to the restroom. We would like that very much. However, Leifier's tone turned stiff. I'm just an apprentice star pilot of the Star Forces at present, and I ask that you treat me as such. Yes, ma'am. We will accommodate your request. Now kindly come this way, Fee Lartner. Leifier sighed and let it pass. Is it always like this for you? Jinto whispered. Come off it, she hissed in reply. They were escorted to a room within the spaceport's facilities. It contained several tables, and the surroundings here were the same array of twinkling stars and wandering fish. There was nobody else there. Leifier was led to the seat at the very back. Jinto assumed he ought to sit next to her at her table, but the officer gestured for him not to. Please, sir, if you could seat yourself over there instead. Huh? Jinto blinked, confused. How come? She chewed over her words, reluctant to answer why. Her diffident eyes drifted away from Jinto's own. He was quite used to this reaction from people. The combination of his brown hair and his noble circlet was throwing her for loops. And it was more than evident that she believed a boy of clearly Lander genetics should not be sitting at the same table as a relative of the exalted Empress. Jinto, shouted Leifier, as though something in her snapped. What are you doing? Just sit down already. I intend to. Jinto was just as ticked off, and he ignored the officer. The officer furrowed her brow, but made no attempt to defy the royal princess. What would you like to drink? Never mind drinks, said Leifier. I want to make use of your Shirgazasser shower room. Could you take us there? A member of the imperial family, asking for the shower room. The officer's eyes opened wide. We have a Gove lavatory, which would be far more becoming. If I could but request you wait a short while. We have no time, Gosukran. Besides, I can assure you that Imperials use regular old shower rooms all the time. Is that so? The officer was befuddled. I'm afraid I don't have the authority to answer. What would you like to drink? Leifier gave in to her tenacity and glanced at Jinto. Give me coffee or some such. Make it cold, said Jinto. He wasn't actually thirsty. He just thought he ought to ask for something. Fetch me some Tirnome, peach juice. Make it hot and add a slice of rup lemon. I see you have unique tastes, Leifier, he quipped casually, but then he noticed the officer giving him a hell of a glare. He gave a slight shrug. Yes, ma'am. I will bring your highness some peach juice. Please wait a moment. The officer wiped the look from her face, bowed deeply, drew away. And could you not forget my coffee while you're at it? Mumbled Jinto. He couldn't help but feel she hadn't listened to a word he'd said from the start. I don't think I'll ever take to this whole atmosphere, said Leifier. Right there with you. Compared to the members of the imperial family, nobles were perhaps not that much of a rarity after all. That said, he now found being ignored rather fun. After all, it wasn't as though he wanted to go around affecting the supercilious aristocrat. What he did want, and it was a modest desire, was for his presence to be acknowledged. At last, the flight control officer came back with another lady and an automaton in tow. The automaton came to a halt by Jinto's side. Here you are. The officer gazed at Jinto with icy eyes. Thanks. As Jinto inwardly murmured his gratitude that they hadn't overlooked him, he retrieved the container of chilled coffee from the automaton's abdomen. The other lady lowered the cup of peach juice she'd been holding reverently. It was obvious she was extremely nervous. Her fingers were trembling, the peach juice sloshing. Then it spilled over the brim. Not a large amount, mind. A single drop of juice touched the table. And yet, the two flew into such a panic, one would think they'd just splashed the royal princess's head with boiling water. Selnai, what have you done? The flight controller's face turned pale. And my apologies. Her tone was so apologetic, in fact, that one wouldn't be surprised if she'd started rubbing the floor with her forehead. Jinto was horrified. What was there to get so upset about? So an infinitesimally tiny amount of peach juice had been spilled, so what? Leifier was also stupefied. What's the matter? I've spilled the drink I was to offer you, Fee Lartner. Well, what ought I to do now? I beg your forgiveness. My forgiveness? For this? Leifier looked blankly at the mere drops on the table. There's nothing to forgive. When she wiped it with her finger, Selnai gasped. Ugh. Please, this is beneath you. I'll wipe it clean, so please, you needn't deign to. Worry not. Leifier lowered her hand, as though to hide the wet finger that Selnai was nigh threatening to cling to. I don't know how you picture a royal palace upbringing, but I can dry my own finger. I'm certain you can, but... Selnai was near to bursting into tears. Leifier looked at Jinto with pleading eyes. Save me. Jinto interjected. I think if you don't drop it, then it'd become something to apologize over. Yes. Selnai bowed while biting her lip. See, even Fee Lartner says so, Selnai, said the controller. Let's excuse ourselves for a moment. Yes. Her shoulders shuddered slightly as she bowed deeply once again. Leifier waited until they'd vacated. I'm liking this less and less. That blew my mind. Are all Imperial citizens like that? It was like they were afraid of something. And I thought the NCCs on the Gosloth seemed a lot tougher. Jinto may have been a noble, but he was a lander genetically, and he was not amused at how servile his fellow landers appeared to be. They're not like them. All the NCCs on the Gosloth are of sound character. I'll take your word for it. He didn't. It had been Leifier who'd told him that within the military, one's family ties didn't matter. There was a high probability that the Star Forces were an exception. You don't believe me, do you? Leifier looked surprised. I speak only truth. You'll see once we reach the capital. I don't tell lies that'll be exposed so quickly. I've even been scolded by an Imperial citizen when I was a child. Leifier got serious. Did they not know you were a royal princess? No, they weren't like you. That citizen was working at my home. Trust me, they knew. Your home, as in the Cryab Kingdom? Yes. It was a gardener who worked for royals. I'd made the Yazria, portable podium, rush around the dining hall with abandon, and ended up ruining a shrubbery patch. Your stories are difficult to follow sometimes, you know that? A shrubbery patch in the dining hall? Don't you mean right outside the dining hall? No, it was a dining garden. Oh. Jinto remembered now, dwellings were usually within artificial environments. For example, the resident could summon rain when and where desired. Since there was no distinction between indoors and outdoors, a flower bed and a sleeping bed could lie side by side. A shrubbery patch in a dining space was nothing to question. Leifier resumed telling her story. The gardener surveyed the disaster zone with grieving eyes, but maintained his courteous demeanor as he spoke his mind to the petrified princess. He told her that he took immense pride in his work, that the artistry of the whole garden hinged on the patch that now lay in disarray, that he felt a great deal of shock and dismay over how it had been mangled by the prank of a 7-year-old girl, that humanity had not yet invented a way to quell the level of resentment seething within him. By the time he was done berating her, Leifier was beside herself, apologizing profusely while her lips trembled. She pledged never to perpetrate such a fatuous deed again, though of course, through the vocabulary of a 7-year-old. The gardener did not hold any stock in Leifier's vow. Naturally, his perfect courteousness never faltered, yet he intimated, if your highness's portable podium should ever damage my creations again, I shall make sure you spend some quality time building an intimate relationship with my soil-enriching earthworms. And only once he'd impressed this on her did he let her go. Needless to say, afterward, my father scolded me as well. He said, if you think your life is valueless enough to trade for a moment's play, then have at it. But don't you ever think so lowly of another person's pride. I get you, but maybe that gardener was just a special case, said Jinto, still doubtful. He wasn't. The servants of both Cryab and of the other nobles I know all take pride in their work. They're all that dignified and high-minded. All right, I believe you. She'd convinced him. Those two seem really prideful when it comes to me. They're ignoring you. Thanks for telling me, but I think I noticed. In any case, I don't like this place. I think it may be best to forego the bath and leave. Just then, the wall by their table shifted. A square window opened in the video of stars and fish, showing the image of a man. He was Ov. His hair was blue, but a faint blue with a golden gloss. His eyes were almond-shaped, and his mouth stuck in a slight sneer. Please forgive the interruption, came his salutations. If I'm not mistaken, you must be Lartia Cryab Fi Lamhair. I am indeed Ovriel Eni Dubrisker, Bear Perian Lamhair, said Lafier. My name is Atosriak Sinekatazer, Liaf Febdot Clower, Baron of Febdash. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. Likewise, Baron. Lafier nodded, then pointed at Jinto. This is Lean Sion Rok Yarluk Dryor Hater Jint Lanyu. Nice to meet you, Lanyulayev, said Jinto, bowing lightly. My humblest greetings to you as well, Lani Yarluk Dryor. But the Baron's interest in Jinto evaporated once he'd gone through the obligatory courtesies. Now then, Fi Lartner, there's something I truly regret to inform you. What? She asked warily. I'm afraid that due to some distressing ineptitude on our end, it has come to light that we currently lack the fuel you require. But that can't be. Your flight control officer clearly said. That's where the aforementioned distressing ineptitude comes in. It was her oversight. And I can only offer my sincerest apologies. I understand. In that case, we'll just resupply directly at an antimatter fuel storage asteroid. Oh, bless your heart, the Baron of Febdash chuckled. Jinto didn't know why, but he shuddered. Your Highness, in your graciousness, you've only just come to my doorstep, the Baron continued. It would shame the name of the Liomaya Febdash, Baron's household, to see you off in such a state. By hook or by crook, I simply must show you around my orbital estate, squalid though it may be. Though I appreciate the generous invitation, Lafier scowled, I have been pressed to a military mission and have no time for leisure. Have you not heard our circumstances? If not, kindly have your servants relay to you what I told them. I am not here on a courtesy call, Baron. I have heard, Fi. We would be eternally grateful if you would suffer our cordial welcome nonetheless. I thank you for the offer. However, it was plain to see that Lafier was feeling nothing close to gratitude. She was beginning to get very annoyed indeed. If you know of our situation, then you should understand that your warm reception is the last thing we need. I believe you should be working out how to get us off your domain instead. We're sorry to have troubled you, but we don't have any vessels you could use. There's just nothing to be done. I see. But... The Baron cut in. Please listen, Your Highness. The closest full-fuel asteroids are in an orbit quite far from here. The only bodies that are orbiting in the vicinity are small, barren asteroids. But how is that possible? Do you doubt my words, Fi? Said the Baron, throwing her a hard look. I'm the one who knows the most about my own territory. Forgive me, she pled sincerely. We must, however, leave for that asteroid, however far it may be. There's no need to go out of your way. I am accelerating the asteroids. In about 12 hours, they'll be much closer. 12 hours. So I hope you understand now, Fi, why I would like it if you could make yourself at home in this mansion of mine. I ask you at least take this time to bathe and partake of the modest meal we can provide you. I too have served in the military, and as such I know what it's like inside a connecting vessel. It pains me to think that a member of the imperial family has had to spend a significant amount of time inside one of those dreadfully cramped things. I'm not an imperial at the moment, Lafier reminded him. I am requesting you provide me with fuel as a Star Forces soldier. Then as the lord of this territory, I request more details of the Star Forces. I do have that right. He'd hit her in a blind spot. You are correct, Baron. It had slipped my notice. There's a Gosloth navigation logbook aboard ship, so I'll send you a copy of the sections you need. That would be lovely, but I shall examine it at the dinner table, the Baron replied, though begrudgingly. Jinto, who had been listening from the side, felt ill at ease all the while. Was this how the upper classes of the Empire spoke to each other? It was like the universe's most refined bickering match. Leifir's tone of speech turned far more formal and ceremonious than when she conversed with Jinto. She argued her case relentlessly. I still think that if we headed out in our vessel now, we would get there faster. As soon as I hand you the copy of the logbook, we would like to make for the nearest fuel asteroid. You would get there faster if you left now, yes, said the Baron. However, I've received reports that Your Highness's connecting vessel needs a bit of inspection. So, no matter what, you wouldn't be able to leave immediately. Inspection? What part? I haven't heard the particulars. Please ask the one in charge of that. Though that engineer is busy working on it, so you shall have to ask after you take some relaxation. The Baron did not let her get a word in edgewise about it. Now I will be having my servants be your guides, so I humbly bid you wait here. The video cut out. Leifir didn't take her eyes off that space on the wall. He ignored you too. Indeed, the only reason he'd even spared him any words of greeting was because Leifir introduced him. After that, he might as well have not been there. Oh well. Can't be helped. I'm just a noble next to an imperial. It's only natural he'd fuss over you more. If he really wanted to give us a cordial welcome, he would have included you. Am I wrong? Or is this complicated to you too? Oh, it ain't complicated. Jinto turned the conversation with the Baron over in his mind. He'd been having a listen with the mindset of an outside observer, so it hadn't bothered him, but it was true that the Baron had acted fairly rudely toward him. Sadly, however, Jinto was used to being snubbed, so he couldn't really muster any anger over it. I'm just happy you got pissed on my behalf. I'm not angry on your behalf. Oh. Jinto took a sip of his coffee. I'm saying that attitude means he can't be trusted. They're inspecting the vessel? It sounds like a big ruse. I'm sorry to say it, but it's difficult to believe that such a small domain even has the technology. I think he may be trying to stall us. Why though? I wouldn't get too paranoid if I were you, Leifir. But he's so unbearable. Well, I'm with you there. Jinto folded his arms. He couldn't argue with that. In fact, the Baron was the type who didn't even need to open his mouth for one to instinctually dislike him. That aversion to his character wasn't nearly strong enough to be characterized as hate, per se, but it did fill him with misgivings regarding the prospect of getting to know the man. If the first off he ever met had been the Baron of Febdash instead of Leifir or Lekshu, he probably wouldn't have ever warmed up to the Ov as a whole. But there was always the possibility that the Baron was some pitiful sap who was just too awkward at making good first impressions. Let's think about it logically. Let's suppose that the Honorable Baron has some ulterior motive. What could that motive be? What's in it for him to draw us into his estate? Leifir could only cock her head. She looked just as clueless as him. Jinto took a stab at it. Maybe he wants the vessel? But why? The princess looked up. Why, you ask? Isn't it obvious? To flee the enemy fleet. That vessel only seats 2 people. Yeah, which would be more than enough for him to escape by his lonesome. And abandon his servants? So you don't trust the Baron overall, but you do trust in his sense of justice? Don't be such an you idiot. It has nothing to do with his own ethics. To abandon his servants and the citizens of his territory would be the greatest shame he could ever incur as a noble. He would be judged for that under imperial law, to say nothing of hijacking a ship. He'd be better off in a prison camp than face the destiny that would await him in the Empire. I see what you're saying. His noble rank saddles him with Selimkoth obligations. Yes, exactly, she nodded. But Jinto wasn't ready to shelve his conjecture just yet. Though you know, when people come to their wits' end, they don't exactly act all that rationally. Back when I was in Vorlash, there was this high-rise that had caught fire, and I saw a bunch of folks jump from the 35th floor. Sure, they must have thought that dying that way was preferable to burning alive, but it made me think, man, that's the one way I never want to go. Maybe our Baron here's about to jump out the 35th floor mentally. Did he look like he was at his wits' end to you? I mean, no, not really. Then he grinned. But that just proves he can't be plotting something then. I suppose not, she admitted reluctantly. I say we accept his warm welcome. I shall join in partaking of dinner." Jinto glanced to the side and spotted the Baron's servants walking their way.